Alright, so to start, you're going to want to take off the mask, your number plate, get at these two bolts right here. I believe they're 10mm. Just grab a wrench and pull those out of there. And then there's some parts of this video I'm not going to show you guys. It's not exactly an in-depth, but you should be able to figure out how to get your number plate off by yourself. It's not too difficult. Once you get that off, go ahead and take your bolts. You can just go ahead and toss them right on the floor. Don't bother trying to save them. They're going to drop anyway. And then go ahead and pull off this bracket. The bracket itself is attached with all these wires, so you'll need to get at the disconnectors and disconnect your light as well as your key. The key is going to be those two wires. The light is going to be the connector. The connector is pretty easy. Just push down and jiggle. Comes right off. No big deal there. As far as these connectors go, they're a little bit trickier. Definitely going to have some issues, especially since they've got the rubber around them. You don't want to rip the rubber. You want to make sure you're grabbing the connector. You might need some pliers. Give it a good tug and a good jiggle. You know, don't rip anything, don't break anything. Those are very important wires. Make sure everything stays attached. There's one more little connector you're going to have to get off. That just connects the wires to the bracket. It's a little zip tie connector there. Pair of pliers and just push on the back. Once you've got it off, you're going to want to take out that little gas light. There's actually a lens, so you'll need a pair of pliers and a flathead screwdriver for this part. The flathead screwdriver just fits right under the edge there and pops that little plastic light cover out, and the rest is just rubber. It should just slide right on through. And you'll take your pliers, pop out the two tabs that are on the bottom there, just squeeze them in while you apply a little pressure upward. Should pop right out. Don't try too hard, you don't want to damage anything. Everything should come out nice and smooth. Okay, now take your relocation kit that you got in the mail, and you're gonna stuff that gas light all the way up inside there. Go ahead and push it pretty hard because you want that little corner to stick out so you can get something to grab onto and pull out the rest. And then once you pull it all the way out, kind of seat it in there, make sure it's nice and sat nice and flush. Then the gas light, depending on whether you're on the left or whether you got the right side kit, you're going to want to put that gas lens on differently. So make sure that when you put it on, you know, it takes a little bit of lubrication and some force, but it pops in there and sits nice and tight, so you don't have to worry about losing that guy. As well as make sure the orientation is correct. And then go ahead and take your screw, stick it on your Allen key. You're going to want a longer Allen for this. I believe I'm using a 5mm. Should be what comes with the kit. And just get it threaded in there lightly, just so that way it holds itself in place. And if you got the left side kit, you're going to want that gas light on the left. It will not fit on the right if you got the right side kit, vice versa. Tighten that screw down. It's going to be tough to find that hole at first, but don't cross-thread it. That's the main thing. If you feel like you're getting cross-threaded, just back it out, change the angle a little bit, and try again. You want it to be nice and flat to the surface there, so that way it leans forward, away from the tank, as opposed to leaning towards the tank. That way you've got clearance with your gas cap, which is what really makes my kits better than the competition. Most of the competition has theirs right up against the gas tank right there. So if you tighten it down, make sure that it's pushed back, make sure the light's pushed back up against the tank, so that way the bar is clear on both sides. Check your bars, make sure they clear. For the next part, you're going to want to thread your wires in through the hole that's provided in the bottom. I found if you kind of push them through with the Allen key, it kind of gets them in there, and then when you're sticking in the ignition cylinder itself, it may require a slight bit of force. So just be prepared for that. Make sure your tabs are lined up in the correct spot, as well as your little indentation is lined up. And then kind of squeeze it and shimmy it in there. It's a tight fit, but it needs to be in order to get that positive click that we want. So once you get it in, push it all the way down. You'll hear those clicks. That's a great sound. And that's how you'll know you're in all the way. And that's what it should look like. You should have your gas light tucked up against the tank like that, and that won't go anywhere. Now, as far as the old bracket goes, I did cut off the top so I could reuse the bracket for the wiring to hold it in place. It's not necessary, but I just think it looks a little neater and things function a little better. So if you wanted to take like an angle grinder or cut off wheel and cut off the top of that plate, it goes back on pretty nice. I just hit it with a little spray paint to make it look nice and not rust. And then get your bolts back in there. Obviously you guys know that's a 10. Once you get those in, really make sure that your wiring's not going to be tugging anywhere. You want to make sure that everything looks free, that it's not going to get away from you there, you know. So when you're connecting your wires, I found it's easier to turn your bars to the left and get the bullet connectors in. This connector obviously is very easy. The bullet connectors are really where you're going to have the trouble. There's not a whole lot of slack on those. If you are finding that you don't have enough slack, you can take off some of the electrical tape from the original harness. There is like a spot where they loop it around itself to have a little bit extra slack in there. So if you need to take off that electrical tape to give yourself an extra couple inches to get around the bar there, that's a little bit better way to do it. So once you've got your connectors in place, you can take your old little wire holder there, stick it right back in that hole. I actually ended up electrical taping mine in place just to be sure. It's not a great connection, so I wanted to make sure it stayed put. And again, check your bars, make sure nothing's tugging, make sure nothing's pinching. It's very important nothing pinches because you could cut wires or have some serious damage there. To hide these wires and secure them a little bit better, I'm going to electrical tape these. If you want to, you can. If you don't have to. I just think it looks neater, and again, it's going to keep things out of the way. So to do this, you take a little bit of electrical tape and wrap it around a toothpick. And so in this configuration, you're able to get like a tiny little roll of electrical tape that you can then use to wrap your stuff up there. Here you can see I've got mine. I just cut the tape nice and flush. You don't want to pull it or it'll stretch. And then cut the ends off of each of the toothpicks. Make it as small as possible so it's easier to fit behind the wires. And this is why you guys come to this channel, for the old school knowledge, the content, you know. That's going to make life a lot easier on you than trying to fit a whole electrical tape roll behind your wires. So if you wrap it, you know, a good amount, don't go crazy, but enough to keep it steady and stable and somewhat stiffen it up so that it's not going to be in the way, getting pinched, getting pulled. If you're not a fan of the electrical tape look, I suppose you can always use heat shrink. It's going to be a little bit more difficult with the connector. You'll have to take apart your connector, but that is also an option. So as you can see here, I'm just getting the last of that electrical taped up, and once I'm done, you'll see how nice that looks. It's really going to make a difference, and it's not too difficult as long as you use that little toothpick trick. Comes along pretty quick. So as you can see, much nicer, much neater. That's not going anywhere. And like I said, I'm going to put that connector in, and I'm going to tape that connector right where it's at there. And you can see I got plenty of room, no pinching, no pulling. Put your mask back on, your number plate there. Make sure everything's covered and not going to be in the way of anything. Obviously, it's got to clear. Make sure everything's got its clearances. Also, don't forget, subscribe to Vegas Pit Bikes on YouTube. Drop a like. We really appreciate you guys coming over. We also have a Facebook group, and we're on Instagram. Go check that out while you're at it.